All right, so hello everyone. It's now 2 p.m. Eastern, and we're officially going to go ahead and get started with our final webinar of 2021. Thank you everybody for joining us and taking the time out of your day. We're really excited to have you guys on here, and we're really happy to end the year on a high note and kind of chat about some communication trends that we're seeing now and that we're going to kind of expect throughout 2021. So if you don't already know us, my name is Alyssa Palmisano. I am the marketing coordinator for Call Potential. And with me here, I've got Phil Murphy, Scott Worden, and Peter Spickenagel. So I will give them a few seconds. They can give a brief introduction, and then we'll hop on into some housekeeping items. So Phil, you want to start us off?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Phil Murphy. We haven't met before, but I'm the founder and president of Call Potential, but I'm also an owner operator. I have 19 stores across the Illinois area.
Awesome. Scott?
I'm Scott Worden. I'm the business development manager. I've been with Call Potential for almost 8 years. I've been in the industry for almost 8 years. Call Potential going on 2.5.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm Peter. I owner operator as well as Phil, but love doing tech stuff as well, and head up the business development side of Call Potential.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you again for everybody for joining us. Before we get started, I do have just a few housekeeping items that I want to run through. As always, we love to keep our webinars very collaborative. So if you have any questions throughout, feel free to jump in, drop it in the chat or the Q&A. We have both of them open. We will have a dedicated time at the very end of the webinar for Q&A in case you want to save your questions. And we also will be sending out the recording once we're finished with the webinar, just in case you want to rewatch it or share it with a colleague or a friend. So keep that in mind. We will be sending that out. So with all that being said, I think we can go ahead and jump in. So I want to first get started and talk about some of the challenges that a lot of operators are really facing, especially now, and especially across all industries. They're really facing the big quit or the great resignation. So I'm kind of curious how this has affected operators' communication with employees or just in general, and what they're doing differently to kind of combat that.
Sure, I can kind of start off with this. We're seeing a lot of this just really across all industries, but also in storage, and especially in my own stores, we've seen it at times in pockets where we've had people that have either had to be out for COVID or an illness or even related family members that are out, and we're seeing stores that have had to adjust hours. We're seeing other customers of ours on the Call Potential side that are having to open and close stores accordingly. So it's become a big problem across the board. You're seeing kind of a lot more push towards hiring. You're seeing a lot more push towards training. You're also seeing some virtualization. I was on a panel with Alyssa Quill over at Storage Asset Management a few months ago, and they've had where about 20% of their stores, I think she had said, have transitioned into an unmanned aspect at some point to kind of compensate for either staffing issues or proximity to other locations or different things like that. And so it all really kind of depends and keeping those stores open and how people are going about tackling that.
Yeah, for me, I think this last year, year and a half, really has been a challenge to find quality staff, and luckily we haven't had a huge problem with that at our company on the operator side, where we didn't have much turnover. But I think that's also we focus really heavily on company culture and communication within our company, which helps with employee retention. So you don't have to go out there and try to compete and try to find new employees, but communication with them, I think, is absolutely huge, making sure they feel like they're part of something bigger. And that's kind of our goal with retaining employees. In some of our markets, our competitors have struggled a lot with actually having a property manager at their location. And that's given us kind of a leg up against the competition too, because they're having a hard time finding staffing, and they're having to kind of piecemeal and send people there once in a while, and it's given us a little bit of a leg up. But when we had to shut down on the staffing side at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and we had to lock the doors, we were able to use our platform, Call Potential, in order to continue that communication and retain those employees, make sure they still have a paycheck, and using that technology to make sure that we can still operate, but also provide income for our staffing. So for us, it was a huge benefit to have the system already in place at our properties.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's a different market right now. So, what people are looking to do is like, how can they take a lot of that time consuming tasks and, be able to automate a lot of that, be able to also use existing staff probably to look after a little bit more stores. If you have multiple properties, having that communication in place is going to be obviously critical. But yeah, we've certainly seen a massive shift, and there's at least, if they're not completely adopting technology, there's some sort of hybrid part of it that's in place.
Yeah, one of the things that we've seen, across the board with our call potential customers is as they're doing this transition, we've seen a lot. Call centers, kind of opening your own call center used to be a very large operator, mid-size operator, and it's kind of like worked its way down. And what we're starting to see is a lot of smaller operators that didn't, previously may not have, justified a call center, that are making it part of their operational efficiencies, where they're sitting there going, instead of this kind of traditional cubicle-based call center, they're having a store that, maybe we can't staff this on Sunday, or I've seen some that have gone, we're closed Monday, Wednesday, Friday because we're staffing Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or things like that. And what they do is they alternate stores, and so store A may answer for store B, and vice versa. And so, having kind of technology in there to kind of direct and route and have kind of existing stores that are open be able to answer it. For instance, our stores, we used to be open, every store was open on Sundays. Because of the difficulty of finding Sunday staffing, we've cut it down to where we've got less than half of our stores that are open on Sundays now. And we've been able to still give that presence by having those stores that are open. The calls through Call Potential are able to ring right into those stores that are open, handle those customers, deal with them there without having to have somebody on site. Now, our intention is to eventually go back to Sundays again, but we're having to use technology to kind of fill the gap while we're dealing with kind of some of the hiring gaps that we've had to handle.
And we're seeing that a lot more, right? I mean, self-storage is typically a little bit more behind in our willingness to adopt new technology. So do you think that's going to continue moving forward now that we're kind of out of this post-COVID, or still in it, but not as much as we were in 2020? Do you think there's more of a willingness to try new technology and keep moving forward with it?
I mean, a perfect example is Extra Space, what the pandemic did for them. It forced them to actually do online rentals. And that company has been completely against doing that for so many years. And, they think, I heard Joe talk about how they think that the online rentals are less valuable than other channels. And they just put it off from doing it, but they had to because of the pandemic. And even big companies like that are forced to look at new technology that maybe they've resisted and are now continuously doing it. You go to Extra Space, they're still doing online rentals, and the stores are open. And so they thought that technology that they didn't need to do are they're now adapting to. So I think any type of push that you're kind of forced to adapt to, whether it's market changes or consumer behavior demands. And what I mean by that is we want to do business the way they want to do business with us, as opposed to how we want to do business with them. I think that changes a lot of operators' point of view, and until and maybe they hold to their guns until they realize, hey, everyone else is adapting and I'm being left behind. And unfortunately, the pandemic kind of opened a lot of people's eyes to that. And I think it's really something that may allow people to start looking at other things that they may have not have looked at and say, hey, well, I was resistant against this kind of type of tech. Maybe I can actually do this. And kind of what Phil was talking about earlier is like that small to mid-sized operator thinking that they can't do their own internal call center or have their own agents answering calls. They now maybe have a hybrid model where they have their own agents, but they also use a third-party call center too. So it's like a kind of getting their toes in the water, and it all, whatever works best for the operator and how they can best service their customer really is what it boils down to.
Sure.
Yeah, and when you see new technology coming in, I mean, one of the prime examples of these kind of technologies that are being adopted we've always, we've had the kiosks that are out there. Open Tech came out with that, I think 15 years ago or whatever it is. And there really hasn't been a lot of movement in that space until all of a sudden the COVID really hit. And, now we're seeing, I see them all the time on LinkedIn, these people trying to come up with these virtual models. How do I staff this? You've got Stories that launched, about 2 years ago, I think it was. And, they heavily help, we've helped them quite a bit with our platform to help kind of manage their call center and do that. But there's these heading towards virtual management. How do I go out there and give this presence where previously the kiosk, the Unmanned was a business plan decision going in, but now we're starting to see the acceptance of technology within kind of our general space. I mean, we're on Zoom instead of in person. We're using kiosks at McDonald's and at Walmart and all these different interactions where I walked into Hertz and rented a car from a terminal with a
Right.
virtual manager. So we're seeing a lot of those kind of coming to fruition and kind of appearing now. Obviously, there's capital expenditure and there's kind of adoption, and there's going to be those early adopters of it. But we're going to see as time goes on. Does that pan out post-COVID? Does that become an operating model that isn't that I'm either unmanned or I'm fully concierge based? Is there something in between
Sure.
that's going to live beyond the pandemic?
Well, I'm kind of curious. We'll take a quick second here and we can run a poll. Let's reach out to some of our attendees and see. I want to see if you guys use any automation or any technology already in your own communication. So I'll go ahead and launch this poll. There we go. Should be live. We'll give you guys a few minutes to go ahead and answer that. Ooh, a lot of yeses already. Wow, 11 for 11. Give you guys a few more seconds.
We're redefining customer service, in this how things have changed.
Mhm.
And you're starting to hear more and more of, how do we keep that consumer, engaged? How do we perform at a high level? And we're slowly figuring out that this, technology can actually provide sometimes even better service.
Well, and it's the efficiencies, it's the model of communication. One of the things that I've said in I don't know how many presentations, but it's a matter of communicating with people the way they want to be communicated with, and having that all available. But listen, I think you get your results.
Yeah, so I've got the results that
Yeah.
are sharing. Just wanted to point out that's really interesting. It seems a lot of people are already using some form of automation. So we're happy to hear that. I know that's going to be the future, Let's see. So another question I kind of had for you guys, it was just revolving. I know, Phil, you kind of touched on internal call centers a little bit earlier. It seems like there's a really big switch to people moving towards implementing their own call centers. Why do you think that is?
I think, at least for me, one of the reasons why I decided to do our own call center, and we actually launched our call center at 10 locations. So it wasn't this having to have 100 locations. It was not just kind of the expense. It wasn't really the expense of the call center, because we did have the third-party call centers. We pretty much used all of them. It was more the thing I saw as an operator, the most important thing we do is rent units. And while the third parties were doing the best job that they could, my belief was that no one could sell as well as my own team could. They understood our process, they understood our product, they understood what we were trying to do. And so I went and I kind of took an analytic view of it and saw about 90% of our off hours calls were coming in the hour before we opened and the hour after we closed. And so going, if I could just cover those hours, I'm not really worried about the 8-10% that are kind of flowing off at 2 a.m. They're going to call back because how many other people are open and what was the cost benefit of that? Instead, I was really focused on getting them in and servicing them and making sure I had a consistent message, because it was too often I'd listen to a call and I wouldn't like what I heard. Something wouldn't be presented the way I wanted to be presented. It wouldn't be kind of sold the way I wanted to be sold. And it's not their fault. They don't know. I mean, they've got a couple thousand locations. I mean, I'm very specific in what I do. And so I think there's a lot of operators that are making that same decision of kind of taking control of what it is. You know, some owner operators out there, they're development guys. Some
Mhm.
people are deal guys. Some people are operations guys. It's where's your value add going to be? And for me, it's that operations side, it's that customer service sales side.
Peter, anything to add to that from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's you know, I believe sales is probably the operator's core competency in almost the entire business. It's something that is the lifeblood of whether you are successful as an operator or not. And outsourcing that, you lose a lot of control over the quality. So you have, and you don't lose all of it because you have some interaction, obviously, but you lose that control, and a lot of operators want to get that control back. And before the cost of doing it yourself was through the roof. You had these massive equipment charges. You had to have a centralized space. You couldn't decentralize it. And the cost was very prohibitive. And so it made a lot more sense just to outsource it. And there's a lot of great call centers in our industry. And it's just at some point, though, they have to service all their clients, the call center clients, almost equally and try to do as best a job as possible. And that means sometimes the stuff I actually want that's more unique or makes us different, they can't achieve that as well as what I could possibly achieve that. And so it's really kind of taking back that control of your quality and oversight on training that a lot of operators are interested in.
Right. No one knows your own business like your own agents, right?
That's right. Hopefully, if you're
idea.
hiring right
Hopefully.
and training right, then hopefully the idea and premise works. So.
Sure. Awesome. Scott, anything to add?
Yeah, I think initially people think of call center as, Peter kind of mentioned it, something that's more centralized. It's got a big room, you got a bunch of desks and computers and phones, and that's just not true. Matter of fact, we see a lot more people kind of utilizing their existing staff and just to be able to route calls. So I don't know if you ever played John Madden, but you got all these like call route things gonna showing where all these lines are going. And that's ultimately, you want to be able to capture every single call. You've got some people, if you've got multiple stores, it can be doable. And as Phil mentioned, he had 10 stores that he started off with. That's significantly less than probably what most people think where that threshold is.
Yeah, and we got some clients that have 4 stores. I think that's a little on the small side sometimes, but they make it work and it fits their operational model. So
now, do you guys think that this is more of a trend right now? Do you see this continuing as we move forward into 2022 and beyond? Are more people gonna start implementing their own internal call center, or how do you see this kind of continuing?
Yeah, I would say, the hub and spoke model is a term that we're hearing more and more in the industry. And so those are when they might have a central or just have one area that takes calls for multiple stores. And what we're finding is, people are looking to acquire, this allows them to scale up pretty quickly because they've already established, how they're going to do their operations, and to add a couple more stores, they're able to scale up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to look at that, what we found, and it's interesting because we've been doing first party call center software for 7 years, 6, 7 years, something like that. And I've never seen an operator start a call center and close it. It's become such an integral part of their operations that once they're in there, they, the only time I've ever seen them close is because they sold to another larger operator that already had their own call center.
Sure.
And it wasn't a decision of, we just don't want to run our own call center. I think a lot of times you get in there and you realize the conversion rates, the interaction, the customer service levels, the cost versus benefit, kind of the ROI side of it ends up being a big deal. So will it happen? I'm sure at some point, but I see this being more towards that trend of customer service with at a lower cost rate that all businesses are looking to be able to provide. It's because, as Scott said, it's not really a call center. It's really getting the call to the right person on your team to be able to answer it.
Yeah.
Call center just tends to be a vernacular.
Yeah, I would say too, if you, let's say you do have a lot of properties, maybe it's 20, 30, and you have 2 people per property, that's, 40 to 60 people you have to train on how you want them to do sales the appropriate way versus, having 2 or 3 people who take all your sales calls. It creates a lot better efficiency over training, control, and quality. So it just makes a lot of sense if you're trying to improve upon that.
Sure. Okay, so moving on, we've seen another trend. A lot of platform services are kind of coming out and a lot of consolidating tech. Our industry has made strides within the past 5 years, especially in new technology. Looking forward, how do you guys see technology changing? More people implementing it, new technology coming out. What are your thoughts on self-storage tech in the future?
I'm pretty hopeful. I think we've been in this industry for quite a long time. I've always felt our industry is significantly behind other industries when it comes to meaningful tech. I want to make sure that is clear, as opposed to just people creating tech just because it's kind of a cool thing and they're like, oh, this is fun. But I think meaningful tech, we've been kind of really behind everyone else up until recently. I feel like we're catching up and catching up fast. I still think we're behind, but I think we don't have what I call deferred maintenance with the technology. I think we're finally having people adopt it. I think we're all improving as operators, which helps the industry as a whole, because that tech is helping us operate more efficiently, provide better customer service. And I think we're going to see a lot of great things in the future, despite consolidation. There's a lot of fear that consolidation will slow down development of that tech. And I'm kind of on the opposite side of that argument, that I think consolidation helps with competition, because if the consolidation happens, new people will spring up and want to compete against that. And so new tech will be created, and then the consolidation people are going to try to keep up. So they're going to develop their tech to try to do better. And I think that tide raises all ships type of thing. And I think we're going to see a lot of great things that will benefit not just the operator, but the customer as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the last 5 years, I think we've seen more technology innovation than we saw in the previous 20 in the industry. We were in a very stagnated position for basically the last 20 years prior to this 5, and we've seen a lot of innovation. I understand what Peter's saying in terms of the consolidation, and I think that has a good chance of spurring innovation outside of that. It'll be a big question whether those that are coming in and consolidating continue to innovate within their own sectors, because that's going to be a big decision for them. But if they don't, there's going to be a lot of people filling those gaps, continuing to build out new products and new things. I mean, we've had 3 good product launches in the past 6 months, from our dashboard to our marketing analytics to a couple of things that we've got coming here in the next couple of months as well. And so it's something where there's a lot of opportunity, whether it's Call Potential takes advantage of it or others that come in, and it'll be a matter of figuring out which of these technologies is right for you as an operator and which one of them aren't.
Scott, anything to add on that?
Kind of the last thing was more of, because of the adoption, this is why it's been accelerating. So
Sure.
The adoption certainly gets us also thinking outside the box, looking at other industries, and we're already forging ahead of kind of what the next set of techs are going to be. So
Awesome. Phil, I know you kind of briefly mentioned that we recently launched marketing analytics. Just another point I wanted to bring up. I know we've heard a lot of operators kind of turning off their PPC. Have you guys done anything to change your PPC strategies, or how has it really affected the market? What are the REITs doing?
I'll jump in on this one, actually. So one thing we look at constantly is our cost per acquisition on new clients. And this last summer, I think everyone on this call and people who are not has seen record-breaking occupancies across the board. Lengths of stays have increased. People who are working from home clean out garages so they have a place to put stuff from an old room to make it into an office. And what you're seeing is, occupancies are up. I think the rates were close to 97% occupied in the summer. I think they've now gone down. And for us, what that has had an effect on is our cost per click. Because we're now with the REITs pulling back on their marketing spend over the summer because they're so highly occupied, they've actually pulled back, which reduces our cost per click on Google, which saved us money. And we pulled back as well. So I think kind of that has helped out quite a lot. We got rid of some of our highest marketing spends. We eliminated that from our marketing mix, and having more knowledge of where that customer first, what their search term was, all the way to the rental, feeding back up into Google Analytics has helped us significantly to make better marketing decisions, especially at a high occupancy environment. A lot of people think you don't have to advertise as much. I think you can pull back a little bit, but you also have more customers, which means you're going to have more move outs, which means you're going to have to get more customers than what you normally would to maintain that higher occupancy. So you just have to be smarter with what you're doing when it comes to your digital marketing ad budget.
Yeah, and within our digital marketing, it's been one of those things where we saw a lot of people pull back, but we've seen it on multiple different facets because of occupancy. People aren't advertising as much, as they don't need to fill as much. We used our marketing to keep driving our occupancy and so we could drive our rents as well at the same time. But one of the things that actually ended up working out well, because we had launched our marketing analytics, which I know I'd mentioned earlier, but one of the things that was pretty powerful for our stores in there was not just that it gave us a better idea of conversions and rentals and leads and calls and everything that was being generated on the digital front, but it also allowed us to use exclusionary tactics. And so with that, within Google Ads, we were able to sit there and push in customers and leads and tell Google whether we wanted our ads to target our existing leads that we know, or exclude advertising to existing customers. And so the marketing analytics engine allowed us to sit there and stop wasting our ad spend on customers who were really just going to our website in order to pay, or were going to our website in order to go to the portal or get a phone number, things like that. And so what we found is that reduced our spend footprint while at the same time increased our conversion aspect. So it was a great kind of outcome for us, not only to spend a little bit less, but also see better results out of what we were spending.
Sure. Scott, anything to add?
Yeah, and I just say, in 2022 and beyond, I mean, you're going to start to see the spend probably increase as we get into the more busy season. But to be efficient and knowing your data and which marketing campaigns are working and which aren't are going to be crucial, because those costs are going to go up. So having that knowledge is going to be extremely important.
Sure. All right, so I do have one last question. I do want to give us a little bit of time here for some Q&A. So there has been a popular meme that's been making rounds, especially marketers have seen it. It's been basically claimed the biggest marketing upset of 2020 is the return of QR codes. So I'm curious, have you guys seen the trend? Are you guys using it? And do you guys think that it's going to kind of make a comeback and be here to stay?
I mean, I've eaten out, so therefore I have come across QR codes.
Yeah, right. Every menu ever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at least in Illinois, the QR codes replaced all the menus. It was one where it was always interesting watching my parents go and go, wait, how do I use this thing? And but it was once they kind of figured it out, all of a sudden they became seasoned pros. And it's interesting because QR codes used to be the separate app you had to download in order to be able to scan one. And now at least all major Apple and Android based phones, it's built right in to your camera. You pull it up, it knows it's there, and it lets you go to it. And so, do I see it sticking around? I think it will. It'll stick around in many kind of interactions that we otherwise might have to type something out. In our own stores, the way we use QR codes is we've got right on our counter, we've got a QR code, and it's nice because you can go to these websites and get your logo printed in the middle of it. So it's a QR code with the Next Door Storage logo in the middle. And when you scan it, it takes you to the review page, the Google review page for that store. And so we're able to sit there and right at the rental process go, hey, if you had a great experience, go ahead now. If it was a bad one, we just cover it up and pretend it's not there. But no, otherwise it's, hey, we'd love to have your review on this. And it's done twofold. One is it's not giving them a card and having them type it out, and really they're probably throwing it on their dash or throwing it away. It's getting them up, takes them right to the page. They're rating us, and it's improved our star rating on Google, which, if you don't know, is a big driver of organic traffic as well. So that's one of the big ways we've used QR codes right now.
Sure.
Yeah, and what we're seeing too is on the unmanned facilities, they'll put up maybe on their gate, access hours where it lists all the company information. They'll actually put a QR code on there. If you want to make a rental, scan the QR code, it'll take you right to your landing page on your website where you can rent online, which during the pandemic, a lot of people definitely adapted the online rentals. So now the QR codes are really easy for that. Another thing we're going to be doing, we're updating all our access controllers as well at all of our properties right now. And we're going to put a QR code underneath the new keypad where tenants, as they're coming in and punch in, they can scan the QR code and download the app that allows them to open up and close our gate with their phone. So there'll be a few different things that we're going to be using the QR code and reviews, as well as another great one that Phil brought up. But I think the QR code hurdle has been met. I think customers now understand how to use it. Before, I think it was something new that people really didn't want to kind of adapt to using it. But because everyone still wanted to go out and eat, and the QR codes are the menus, everyone is just very used to it now. So it's when you get to a certain point or a tipping point in society where a consumer knows how to use a certain technology or product, it then now can be adapted in pretty much almost any industry if you use it right, and the acceptance of that new technology is a lot easier, which I think that's what we're seeing now. So yeah, I think it's going to be around because people have accepted it, they are familiar with it, and it makes things easier to get people to interact with you on the web.
Great point.
See,
Scott?
I always thought the QR code 10 years ago was going to be the big thing. And I was back in the day when I was in the ticketing world. So I worked for sports entertainment teams, and we were thinking about putting these QR codes on there. That didn't happen. 10 years later, now it's being more adopted. Ironically, in Canada, QR codes have had a higher adoption rate over the last several years. So they're just kind of continuing to do what they were doing before. I think the next thing with QR codes is then how do you have more things like Peter's mentioning with the apps, being able to then order, being able to, can we get now fancy and say, boxes and tape and all that other things from a operator standpoint. So there might be some other revenue opportunities there as well.
Yeah, and for those with unmanned facilities, I mean, that's going to be a huge game changer. We do have another poll in here, so I'll pull that up. I'm curious to see how many people actually have unmanned facilities already, or if you've closed any offices to run an unmanned facility. So I'll go ahead and launch that poll right now. Give you guys a few minutes to answer that.
As host and panelists cannot vote.
Sorry, Scott.
Yeah, we'll assume your vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe.
See.
No, I mean that's an interesting thing. While we're waiting on the results on that, I mean it's there's a lot of people making decisions that if you would have talked to them a couple of years ago, they would have answered no. There's always been that. Are you open? Are you manned? Are you unmanned? There was no in between.
Right.
With most operators, and we're seeing a lot of flexibility. We're seeing a lot of adaptation, whether it's staffing or operational or just cost wise or whatever it is, to say, okay, how can I not sacrifice my level of service, but still be able to, standardize what it is I'm delivering or maximize the kind of the experience in there. And so, seeing a lot of new things. Oh.
So it looks like there's a lot of no's. Kind of surprised.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, and that could also, could be more of a hybrid too. Like we talked earlier about
Right.
closing days, and also utilizing maybe, annex location. So there could be that type of, but the staffing we talked about earlier could have forced some people to close, and they had to find an alternative. And one alternative was to,
Well, and
unmanned.
Lauren here on the messages just messaged, she hasn't had to close them because of the pandemic, but they've gone that route of all of her stores are closed.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
then I know, Peter, you have some and I have some where we operate that satellite aspect where they're close enough in proximity that we basically tell them, hey, come over here to this other office in order to rent.
Yeah, so we have a smaller location in one of our Michigan locations. We're only open 3 days a week, and the rest of the time we're the other location's 3 miles away. So it's if anyone needs anything, they always can go to the other location. Same thing with anytime we get calls, any issues, both properties are CC'd on those emails. So everyone works as a team in that market. And it's kind of a hybrid approach, like what you're saying, that we're not open 7 days a week at the smaller location, but we do have somebody there because I think it's still really important to have that person. But we use technology to be able to help communicate and rent and collect payments, all that stuff. By that hybrid approach.
Yeah, Douglas says we're utilizing some unmanned hours during each business day.
Alarm automation.
During each business day using alarm automation.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've seen people that have gone out and had like a Ring doorbell that they've installed for, we had gone out and installed those at a few of our stores when we thought we were going to be closing down due to COVID to give some sort of on-site interaction. We actually haven't had to utilize them, but if anybody wants to buy a Ring doorbell, I've got a lot.
Now
We
we were
know a
talking
guy.
about regifting. So
They're
you,
Right.
regifting.
That's right.
Awesome. Okay, so thanks, guys. I think we're going to go ahead and jump into Q&A here. It looks like we have a few audience questions. I know we touched on how we see communication or how we see technology kind of changing the industry in the next 5 years. Someone specifically asked, how do we see it changing tenant communication in the next 1 to 5 years? Is there anything else you guys had to add on to that?
So I think a lot of people think that all tenants only want to communicate via text, email, or non-phone means, right? They don't really want to talk to anyone. I think that is partially true. I think there is a portion of your tenant base that is like one of my friends who will never pick up the phone when I call him, but he'll text me immediately after saying, hey, what's up? What do you want? But there's also a significant part of your tenant base that still wants to have that human interaction. And the reason why we know that is because we look at how many incoming calls we have on payments, not just, even though we implement text and email and pay online, all these different channels that people can pay, still one of the largest channels that we have from text, email, or online is people calling in to make their payment. So the idea that tenant communication will go completely like real phone calls or in person, I think it's not realistic. I think everyone wants to communicate in different ways. And the way to handle future tenant communication is by offering all those ways to be able to communicate and not focusing just on what you want to do as an operator.
Yeah, I'm tend to be in complete agreement there. It's you have to communicate the way they want to, otherwise you're carving out a segment of the population you've decided not to serve. But one of the ways that I think people don't really talk about a lot that I think will be interesting. I don't know if it's going to become big in the industry, but it's something where I'm starting to see it in other places is video. We had one of the people that we work with is in the process of moving, and he had to get a moving estimate. When I moved, the guy came out and he walked around my apartment and figured out, gave me a quote and then moved everything. Well, now he pulls it up on like FaceTime, goes around and he basically gave him his estimate by walking around the house and pointing out those things that were the large items and giving him a sense of what was there as he took his notes. And so it'll be interesting if we get to that point where you've got a customer on a website that pulls in and all of a sudden they're demoing a unit. They don't want to come in and take a look, not because of COVID. Maybe it's because of COVID. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just, I don't really want to get in the car and drive to you. And so all of a sudden you're giving these virtual tours. You're talking to them about where things are, or they're on site and having a problem with a lock. And, rather than telling them, okay, step on the handle so you can slide the latch over, you're able to sit there and help them virtually, whether it's in that call center or it's in the store. I think that's a strong possibility of making its way into the industry in the next 1 to 5 years.
That's kind of interesting. We have another question here. Someone wrote in, do you see communication becoming a preferred channel over voice in the future? Text communication, I'm sorry. Text communication becoming a preferred channel over voice in the future. So Peter, I know you kind of touched on that too.
I'd say it is a preferred method already.
Yeah.
I just, it's going to change. The percentages are going to always go back and forth, I think. I don't think you ever then get rid of phone conversation or in person, because I think those are two very valuable communication channels, but I do see text growing. I'm pretty sure that since my mom is now texting, almost everyone in the US is texting. So it's the adoption's there.
Sure.
So a little hard to read sometimes, but it's there. So everyone's texting. So but there is still the need for phone conversations and in person.
Well, based off my kids, texting is the way to go because that's the only way I can get their attention.
I thought you just did TikToks to get their attention.
That's
Right,
true,
right.
too.
Come on, you've got a Gen Z in here. Like
That means I have to
you're
get on TikTok.
talking to the right audience. Absolutely. Awesome. And then we just have one last question here. Someone asked, what's the difference between a satellite location and an unmanned location?
So satellite for me, and maybe everyone has different definitions for it, is a location that you have to drive to, but it's ran by a main facility. So it's, I think satellite locations or annexes, those terms have been around forever. The newest term for it is hub and spoke, where you have a main hub and you have your individual spokes that are the the annexes. Unmanned completely could be just a location where you don't have anything around you and you don't have an office, you don't have anything like that. Maybe it's fully ran by a kiosk, maybe it's ran by Da Vinci locks, maybe, where you're utilizing different technologies. To me, that's what unmanned really is. It's like an island by itself that doesn't have any other locations that are around it or an office. You may have a roving maintenance crew that services that property, cleans units, whatnot, overlocks and reverses overlocks, stuff like that. But that's, to me, an unmanned, where it's completely, there's no office around a annex or a satellite would be. You have a main location that runs those locations.
Interesting. All right. Let me double check here. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. So guys, thank you so much for joining on. Do you guys have any closing remarks before we?
No, thanks everybody for coming in and sitting in with us, and hopefully you are able to take away something good and valuable.
Yeah, and if you guys ever have ideas too about what you want to do technology wise, we always love to hear them. We're definitely, don't think we're the only experts on this, and we love ideas. So appreciate you attending and listening to us talk, but we always want to hear you talk as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Like I said earlier, we will be sending the recording out in case you want to share it with a friend or just rewatch it. So thank you again, and happy holidays. I hope to see you guys all in the new year.
Happy holidays,
Awesome.
everybody.
Thanks, guys. Take care.